Darkness filled the living room except for the pale glow of a single lamp beside the worn leather chair. Between calloused fingers, Marcus Bennett held a photograph, edges soft from 3 years of handling. Jennifer's smile looked back at him, frozen on their last anniversary before the drunk driver took her away. A pickup truck threw a red light at 45 miles per hour. The police said she never saw it coming. The other driver walked away with a broken arm. Jennifer died before the ambulance arrived. Down the hall, 6-year-old Emily slept peacefully, clutching Mr. Whiskers against her chest. The stuffed bear had been Jennifer's final gift, presented on Emily's 3rd birthday, with a promise to always protect her. The child refused to sleep without it, as if the worn fabric still carried her mother's scent, her warmth, her love. Marcus set the photograph on the side table and rubbed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring another day of the same routine he'd perfected over 3 years. Wake at 6, make breakfast, braid Emily's hair. He'd watched 17 YouTube tutorials before getting it right. Pack her lunch with the crusts cut off just how she liked. Drop her at Riverside Elementary by 7:30. Work his shift at Morrison Construction from 8 to 4. Pick Emily up from after-school care. Homework, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories with voices for every character, because that's what Jennifer used to do. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Jake. "Still coming to the game Sunday? Emily needs to see her uncle kick ass at softball." Marcus typed back, "She'll be there, wouldn't miss it." At 12:07 a.m., the doorbell shattered the silence. The clock confirmed what Marcus already knew. Nobody came to his door at this hour. The Hendersons next door were asleep by 9. The Patels across the street traveled for work. His family lived 2 states away in Ohio. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. The bell rang again, more urgent this time, sound pressing against the quiet house like an intruder. Emergency? Wrong address? Someone drunk and lost? His engineer's mind calculated possibilities as he walked to the door. The woman standing on his porch looked nothing like he remembered, yet he recognized her instantly. 4 years ago, he'd been driving home after a double shift, exhausted and half asleep behind the wheel of his Honda. Highway 89 stretched empty under the 2 a.m. darkness when he spotted the black Lexus pulled onto the shoulder, hood smoking, hazard lights blinking. He'd almost driven past, not his problem, not his business, but Jennifer's voice had echoed in his head, the way she always said everyone deserved help when they needed it most. The woman had been dressed in an Armani suit then, her posture perfect despite the obvious frustration radiating from her stance. Her phone had died, her AAA membership had lapsed. She'd just flown back from New York and her car had overheated 10 miles from home. Marcus had called the tow truck and waited with her for 90 minutes in the February cold, sharing his jacket when she started shivering. She'd offered him $500. He'd refused, simply saying he didn't help people for money. She'd given him her business card anyway. Victoria Pierce, CEO, Pierce Development Corporation, and told him to call if he ever needed anything. He never did. Now she stood on his porch in wrinkled clothes, her eyes red and swollen, her hands trembling at her sides. Victoria Pierce. "I need your help." The words barely made it past her lips. Marcus studied her face. Whatever had brought her here had shattered something inside her that money couldn't fix. He stepped aside and let her in. She walked into his living room and looked around at the modest furniture, the children's drawings taped to the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway, the basket of toys beside the couch. This was not her world. Everything about her screamed wealth and power, the diamond studs in her ears, the Italian leather shoes, the designer purse clutched against her side. Yet here she stood in his small house, looking more lost than anyone he'd ever seen. Marcus gestured toward the couch. "Sit down. Tell me what's going on." Victoria lowered herself onto the edge of his sofa, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She took a breath, then another, as if gathering courage to speak words she'd never said aloud. "My father died 11 weeks ago. The practiced delivery couldn't hide her exhaustion. Marcus nodded slowly. He'd seen the news. Harrison Pierce had built one of the largest real estate empires on the East Coast before pancreatic cancer claimed him at 68. The obituary had filled half a page in the business section. Victoria's jaw tightened. "Don't say you're sorry. He wasn't sorry for anything he did to me while he was alive." She looked up, and in her eyes Marcus saw something raw and desperate, something that reminded him of the way Emily had looked the day he'd tried to explain why Mommy wouldn't be coming home. The words spilled out faster now. "His will has a condition. I only inherit the company if I have a biological child with a legal father on record before my 35th birthday. I have 11 months. 11 months to do something I spent my entire adult life avoiding." She let out a hollow laugh that held no humor, only bitterness sharp enough to cut. Marcus remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest. His engineering background had taught him to analyze problems systematically, and right now every alarm bell in his head was ringing. "Why come to me?" He kept his voice neutral, watching her closely. From her purse came a folder. Her movements remained precise, despite the tremor in her fingers. "Because you're the only man I've ever met who didn't want anything from me." The document slid across the coffee table. Numbers, legal terminology, clauses and conditions typed in crisp 12-point font. $500,000. The pitch sounded practiced, professional. "You would be listed as the father on the birth certificate. Once the legal requirements are satisfied and I secure my inheritance, you can walk away. No obligations, no responsibilities, no contact if that's what you prefer. Clean and simple." Marcus didn't look at the papers. He kept his eyes fixed on her face, watching the way she held herself together through sheer force of will. "You think I would sell my child?" The words came out harder than he intended. Victoria flinched as if he'd struck her. The professional mask cracked at the edges. "It wouldn't be like that. It would be a business arrangement. The child would be mine. You would simply be a sperm donor with a signature." The words hung in the air between them like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Marcus thought about the night Emily was born, how Jennifer had held their daughter and cried with joy, how she'd whispered promises about always being there, about love that would never end. He thought about the funeral, standing beside a casket while Emily clung to his leg and asked when Mommy would wake up. Victoria stood abruptly, her composure fracturing. "You don't understand. If I don't do this, my cousin Dylan takes everything. Every building I developed, every deal I closed, every 18-hour day I worked to prove I deserved my place at that table. Gone. All of it, given to a man who has done nothing but wait for me to fail." Her voice rose, the professional veneer dissolving completely. "I have spent my entire life trying to be good enough. Good enough for my father. Good enough for the board. Good enough to matter. And now, even from the grave, he's telling me I'm not. That without a child, everything I've built means nothing." Marcus watched her fall apart in his living room. Jennifer used to say everyone carried invisible wounds, scars that shaped them in ways they couldn't always see. He'd learned to recognize the signs, the way people held themselves when they were breaking, the particular quality of desperation that came from running out of options. "The answer is no." His voice stayed quiet but firm. Victoria's face crumpled. She reached for her purse, fingers fumbling. "Please. I'll double the amount, $1 million, whatever you want." The question felt like a punch. "What kind of man do you think I am?" She had no answer for that. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Marcus walked to the hallway and looked toward Emily's bedroom door. The nightlight glowed softly underneath it, a warm yellow beacon in the darkness. He thought about the promise he'd made at Jennifer's funeral, standing beside her grave while Emily's hand gripped his with surprising strength for a 3-year-old. He'd sworn to protect their daughter from a world that could be cruel and cold. to never let her feel abandoned or unwanted or alone. But he also thought about Jennifer's voice, the way she'd believed that everyone deserved a chance to know what love felt like. Real love. The kind that didn't come with conditions or contracts. She'd seen something worth saving in him when they met. A broken kid from a broken home who'd convinced himself he was better off alone. She'd proven him wrong. Behind him, Victoria gathered her folder, preparing to leave. Her hands shook as she tucked the papers back into her purse. Marcus turned back to face her. "I won't give you a child like it's a transaction." Victoria's shoulders sagged in defeat. She'd tried everything, offered everything, and still found herself standing in the ruins of her last desperate plan. The word stopped her mid-motion. But hope flickered across her face, mixed with fear and confusion. A breath. He knew what he was about to say would change everything. "If you really want my help, you'll have to accept my condition tonight." She stared, as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. Her business mind raced, calculating possibilities, searching for the angle, the catch, the hidden cost. "You move in here. You live in this house with me and my daughter." Each word carried absolute certainty. "You learn what it means to be part of a family. A real family, not some arrangement on paper." The weight of his words hung between them. "I won't bring a child into this world just to have its mother disappear. My daughter already lost her mother. I won't let another child be born into something worse." Silence filled the room. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. A car drove past, headlights sweeping across the curtains. Victoria's voice came out barely above a whisper. "You want me to live here? In this house?" Marcus nodded. 3 months. After that, if you still want to have a child with me, we'll talk. But not before. And not for money." Her mind reeled. This wasn't how business worked. This wasn't how anything worked in her world. You identified a problem, found a solution, executed the transaction. You didn't move into strangers' houses and play pretend family. You didn't waste 3 months on some experiment in domesticity when you had 11 months to produce a biological heir and save a $340 million empire. The question burst out, "I don't understand. What do you get out of this?" Marcus picked up the photograph of Jennifer from the side table. He looked at it for a long moment, his thumb tracing the edge of the frame. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 years of grief and growth. "My wife believed that everyone deserves a chance to know what love feels like. Real love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or contracts." He set the photo down gently, reverently. "Maybe I'm a fool, but I'd rather be a fool than a man who sells his future child to a stranger." Victoria stood in the middle of his living room, caught between the life she knew and something completely unknown. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to find another solution, any other solution. Her lawyers could find someone. There had to be another man somewhere who would take the money and sign the papers without these insane demands. But she'd already tried 8 different candidates. 3 had demanded equity stakes in the company. 2 had threatened to leak the arrangement to the press unless she paid them additional hush money. 2 had insisted on full custody rights, turning her desperate situation into a custody battle before the child even existed. 1 had sold the story to a tabloid journalist for $20,000. Marcus Bennett was the only man she'd found who didn't want to use her, exploit her, or hold her hostage. And now he was asking for something she didn't know how to give. 3 months, 90 days. It would still leave her 8 months to get pregnant, carry the child to viability, satisfy the legal requirements. The timeline was tight but possible. But living here? With him? With his daughter? Playing house like some kind of social experiment? She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, resignation had replaced the fight in her face, or perhaps something deeper, something she couldn't name yet. "Fine. I accept your condition." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Marcus nodded once, his face unreadable. "There's a guest room down the hall. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Victoria walked past him toward the hallway, her expensive shoes silent on the worn hardwood floor. She stopped at the threshold and turned back, one final question burning in her mind. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Marcus looked toward Emily's door again, toward the soft yellow glow of the nightlight and the small form sleeping inside. "Because my daughter still asks if her mother is coming back, and I never want another child to grow up asking that question." The words settled over Victoria like a weight. She turned and walked down the hall, past the bathroom with its cheerful yellow towels, past the closed door that must be Emily's room, to the guest room at the end. The space was small but clean, a wooden dresser, a narrow closet, a window overlooking what she assumed was a backyard. On the nightstand sat a glass of water that hadn't been there when she'd first arrived. Someone had checked on the room during their conversation, preparing it for a guest who might need it. Victoria sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. In the past 18 hours, she'd flown from New York to Boston, attended an emergency board meeting, fielded 17 phone calls from her CFO about Dylan's latest maneuvers, driven 3 hours to this anonymous suburb, and gambled her entire future on a stranger's conditional mercy. Now she sat in a guest room that smelled faintly of lavender and clean sheets, having agreed to live with a man and his daughter for 3 months in some bizarre test of her capacity for human connection. The absurdity hit her all at once. Victoria Pierce, CEO of Pierce Development Corporation, former Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree Harvard Business School graduate, sat alone in a stranger's guest room because her dead father had decided she wasn't complete enough to deserve her own accomplishments. She thought about calling her assistant Chloe. She thought about texting her lawyer, David Morrison, to update him on this insane development. She thought about checking her email, reviewing the quarterly reports, preparing for tomorrow's conference call with the Tokyo investors. Instead, she lay down on the bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Her mind raced through scenarios, contingencies, exit strategies. What if this didn't work? What if she couldn't adapt? What if Emily hated her? What if Marcus changed his mind? What if she discovered she actually liked it here, and that terrified her more than failure ever could? Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains. Victoria woke disoriented, her body stiff from sleeping in her clothes, her mouth dry. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The midnight drive, the desperate proposal, the impossible condition she'd accepted. The smell of bacon drifted under the door, accompanied by the sound of a child's voice chattering about something important. Victoria sat up and looked around the guest room in daylight. The walls were painted a soft cream color. A landscape painting hung above the dresser. Nothing expensive, probably purchased at Home Goods or Target, but pleasant enough. The room felt lived in despite its simplicity, as if it had hosted guests before who'd been welcomed rather than tolerated. She stood and caught her reflection in the mirror above the dresser. Her hair hung in tangles. Her makeup had smudged during the night. Her designer blouse looked like she'd pulled it from a laundry hamper. She looked, in a word, wrecked. The bathroom down the hall was small but clean. Victoria found a spare toothbrush still in its package sitting on the counter beside a note written in neat handwriting. "Guest supplies in the cabinet. Help yourself. M." She brushed her teeth and washed her face, the cold water shocking her system into full wakefulness. Her reflection looked marginally better, though nothing could hide the exhaustion in her eyes or the uncertainty in the set of her jaw. The kitchen sounds grew louder as she approached, the sizzle of bacon, the clatter of plates, Emily's voice rising and falling in an enthusiastic monologue about a dream involving a purple dinosaur and a spaceship. In the doorway, Victoria hesitated. At the stove, Marcus flipped pancakes. At the table, Emily swung her legs and gestured wildly with a fork. Pink pajamas, cartoon characters Victoria didn't recognize, dark hair in sleep-tangled waves around her face. Mid-sentence, the child stopped. Her eyes went wide. "Daddy, who is that?" Innocent, direct. Marcus flipped a pancake before answering, his tone casual. "This is Miss Victoria. She's going to be staying with us for a while." Emily's eyes narrowed in concentration, her 6-year-old mind processing this information. "Are you Daddy's new girlfriend?" Marcus's voice carried a gentle warning, M. The child's expression brightened with sudden understanding. "I'm just asking. My friend Sophie's mom has a boyfriend. He brings her flowers sometimes. Are you going to bring Daddy flowers?" Victoria had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. She'd faced hostile boardrooms filled with men who thought she'd inherited her position rather than earned it. She'd stared down investors, journalists, and competitors without flinching. But standing in this kitchen being interrogated by a 6-year-old left her completely unprepared. "I'm just a guest. Just a guest." She heard the awkwardness in her own voice. Emily seemed to accept this answer, at least for now. She returned her attention to her pancakes while Marcus set an extra plate on the table and nodded toward an empty chair. Breakfast became a strange affair. Victoria picked at her food while Emily dominated the conversation with stories about her teacher, Mrs. Thompson, her best friend Zoe, a caterpillar she'd found on the playground, and whether dolphins or sharks were cooler. Marcus listened with patient attention, asking questions, laughing at the right moments, gently correcting Emily when she talked with her mouth full. This was their routine, Victoria realized. This was their life. The ease of it, the natural rhythm, highlighted just how foreign this world was to her. In her penthouse apartment, breakfast meant black coffee consumed while reviewing market reports. Conversation meant conference calls and strategy sessions. Family meant quarterly dinners with her father, where he'd critique her performance and find her lacking. After breakfast, Marcus handed Victoria a dish towel. The gesture was simple, matter of fact. "Everyone contributes in this house." Victoria stared at the towel as if he'd handed her something alien. In her penthouse, a cleaning service came 3 times a week. She couldn't remember the last time she'd washed a dish. 10 years? 15? But Marcus was already scrubbing a pan, and Emily was putting her plate in the sink, and there was nothing to do but dry. Her hands moved clumsily at first, water dripping onto the counter, the towel growing damp faster than seemed reasonable. Marcus said nothing, simply handed her another dish and continued washing. Emily watched from her position by the sink, her expression thoughtful in a way that made Victoria nervous. When the dishes were done, Marcus pulled out his phone and checked the time. "I need to get Emily ready for school. The guest room closet should have some space if you need to unpack. We'll talk more tonight." Then he and Emily disappeared down the hall, leaving Victoria alone in the kitchen with wet hands and a strange feeling in her chest she couldn't quite identify. She returned to the guest room and pulled out her phone, ignoring the 83 unread emails. Instead, she opened her contacts and stared at Chloe's name for a long moment before typing, "Taking personal time. Handle the Tokyo call. I'll check in later." Then she opened her suitcase and began the strange task of unpacking her life into someone else's space. The first week tested everything Victoria thought she knew about herself. Her tailored suits looked absurd in this house. Her high heels clicked too loudly on the worn hardwood floors. Her phone rang constantly with calls from the office, from lawyers, from board members demanding her attention, and she found herself stepping outside to take them, pacing the small front porch while inside, a life carried on without her. Before the first day was even over, coffee and conversation. She'd expected anger about the phone calls, frustration about her divided attention. Instead, Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her search results. "I'm not reckless, Victoria. Before I let you stay here, I did my homework." Steady. Factual. Google searches. Articles about Pierce Development Corporation. LinkedIn profile verification. Criminal record checks. Scandal searches. Red flags. None that would suggest danger to his daughter. More than that, he'd texted his brother Jake, a retired police officer, and asked him to run a background check. The results had come back clean. No arrests, no outstanding warrants, no history of violence or fraud. Victoria had stared at him, processing this information. He'd made her feel foolish for assuming he was naive, for thinking she'd manipulated him into something reckless. Marcus Bennett might be willing to help her, but he wasn't stupid. He'd protected his daughter first, just as any good father would. The realization steadied her. If he'd been careless, she could have written him off as a fool. But knowing he'd been deliberate, careful, and still chosen to help her, that meant something she couldn't quite name. However, his conditions remained firm. She was not to be alone with Emily until he was comfortable. He didn't say it cruelly, just stated it as fact. Trust had to be earned. Marcus went to work each morning at Morrison Construction, leaving at 7:30 and returning each evening at 4:45. He never stayed late anymore. Since Jennifer's death, he'd stopped taking overtime shifts, stopped volunteering for weekend projects. His life revolved entirely around his daughter: homework, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. The rhythm of his days followed a pattern worn smooth by 3 years of repetition. Victoria watched from the edges at first, unsure where she fit. On Tuesday, Marcus suggested she could read to Emily at bedtime. Victoria had protested that she didn't know how to read to children. His response had been simple. You open the book. You read the words. She'll tell you if you're doing it wrong. It wasn't a suggestion. Emily's room was small but cheerful, decorated with drawings she'd made in school and photos of a woman Victoria recognized from the picture in the living room. Jennifer smiled from every frame, frozen in moments of happiness Victoria could only imagine. At the beach, at a birthday party, holding infant Emily in the hospital. Emily was already in bed, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, her eyes bright with expectation. The question came out cautious. Daddy said you're going to read tonight? Victoria nodded, settling on the edge of the bed with the book Marcus had selected. That's right. Emily's next question carried more weight. Do you know how to do the voices? Victoria looked down at the book, a story about a princess and a dragon. What voices? The explanation came with the serious authority only children possess. Daddy does voices. The dragon has a deep voice, and the princess has a brave voice, and the king has a silly voice because he's not very smart. Victoria looked at the words on the page. She thought about all the presentations she'd given, all the speeches she'd memorized, all the personas she'd crafted to survive in boardrooms and negotiations. Surely she could manage children's book characters. She gave the dragon a deep voice. She gave the princess a brave voice. And when the king appeared, she made him so ridiculous that Emily burst into giggles, the sound bright and pure and completely unself-conscious. When the story ended, Emily looked up at her with something like approval. You're good at this. Victoria closed the book, words catching in her throat. Warmth bloomed behind her ribs, unfamiliar, but undeniable. Good night, Emily. She hadn't meant to whisper. The child was already drifting off, still smiling. Good night, Miss Victoria? In the hallway, Marcus was waiting. His expression was unreadable in the dim light. Victoria found herself explaining. She liked the voices. His response was simple, certain. She would. They stood there in the dim light, two people from different worlds, bound by an agreement neither fully understood. By Thursday, Victoria had learned which grocery store Marcus preferred, the Kroger on 5th Street, not the Whole Foods closer to downtown. She'd learned that Emily liked her sandwiches cut diagonally, not straight across. She'd learned the sound of the house settling at night, the way the kitchen faucet dripped if you didn't turn it hard enough, the particular creak of the third step on the front porch. She was still working, still fielding calls and reviewing contracts, but the pull of that other life grew weaker with each passing day. The emergency board meeting she'd attended before driving here felt like it had happened months ago, rather than days. On Friday evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Victoria found Marcus sitting on the back porch, staring at the stars. She hesitated, then sat down beside him. The question came out carefully. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus nodded, his eyes still on the sky. Victoria took a breath. What was she like? Jennifer? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. She was light. That's the only way I can describe it. When she walked into a room, everything got brighter. She could make anyone laugh, even me, and I'm not exactly known for my sense of humor. Victoria smiled slightly. I noticed. The details came slower now, each word carrying weight. She died on her way to pick up Emily from school. Some kid ran a red light while texting. Jennifer never had a chance. I was working late that day, trying to finish a project. I should have been the one to pick Emily up. If I'd just left on time, Victoria cut him off. That wasn't your fault. Marcus's jaw tightened. I know, but knowing something and feeling it are different things. They sat in silence as the night deepened around them, the stars bright against the darkness. Victoria thought about her own guilt, her own grief, the wound her mother had left when she walked away. The words came out quietly, surprising her with their honesty. My mother left when I was 7, just packed a bag one morning and walked out the door. My father never explained why. He just said I needed to be better, to be stronger, to be someone worth staying for. Marcus turned to look at her, really look at her, and she felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with physical vulnerability. She continued, the confession spilling out. I spent my whole life trying to be that person. Every promotion, every deal, every success, I thought if I achieved enough, I would finally be enough. But it was never true. He's dead now, and he's still making me prove myself. Victoria. His voice gentled. It wasn't your fault either. Children don't make their parents leave. She felt tears burn behind her eyes, hot and unwelcome. No one had ever said that to her, not once in 27 years. Her father had spent her entire childhood reinforcing the opposite message, that she'd failed, that she'd been insufficient, that her mother's departure was somehow connected to Victoria's inadequacy. Hearing someone say otherwise, hearing Marcus state it as simple fact rather than comfort, cracked something inside her she'd spent decades building. The second week brought new challenges. Victoria's phone rang incessantly now. Dylan had been busy. He'd hired investigators, called in favors, spread rumors through the board about their CEO living in scandal with an unknown man. Her lawyers sent increasingly urgent messages. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated. Robert Chen, her CFO, called on Tuesday evening while Victoria was helping Emily with math homework. She stepped outside to take the call, pacing the front porch while Chen's voice crackled with barely contained panic. His words came fast, clipped. Dylan's making serious moves, Victoria. He's got 6 board members listening to him. They're talking about calling an emergency meeting to remove you as CEO before the inheritance deadline even matters. They're claiming you're unstable, that you've abandoned your responsibilities. You need to come back. Now. Victoria looked through the window at Emily and Marcus bent over a worksheet together, Emily's face scrunched in concentration while Marcus patiently explained something about multiplication. I need more time, Robert. Exhaustion weighted every syllable. Chen's voice rose. Time is what you don't have. Dylan's painting you as erratic and irresponsible. Living with some random guy nobody's ever heard of doesn't exactly help our case. The correction came out sharper than intended. His name is Marcus Bennett, And he's not random. Silence on the other end. Then Chen's voice, quieter. I've known you for 8 years, Victoria. I've never heard you sound like this. What's going on? She didn't have an answer for that. She ended the call and stayed outside, staring at the suburban street with its neat houses and trimmed lawns. This wasn't her world. She didn't belong here among the minivans and basketball hoops and neighborhood watch signs. But walking back inside and seeing Emily's face light up when she explained a math problem correctly, that felt more real than any board meeting ever had. The pattern continued. Victoria started leaving earlier for phone calls, coming home later, missing dinners. The bedtime stories became sporadic. The fragile rhythm she'd built began to fracture under the weight of her other life demanding attention. On Thursday evening, Emily asked Marcus a question Victoria wasn't meant to hear. Mom V doesn't like being here anymore, does she, Daddy? The nickname hit Victoria like a physical blow. She'd been standing in the hallway, about to join them for dinner, when Emily's small voice stopped her cold. Mom V. When had that started? When had she become something more than Miss Victoria? Marcus's response was careful, honest. She's dealing with some difficult things, sweetheart. It's not about you. Emily's voice carried the particular sadness of children who'd learned too young that adults couldn't always keep their promises. That's what you said about Mommy, that she didn't want to leave. But she did anyway. Victoria pressed her back against the wall, unable to draw a full breath. She'd done exactly what Marcus had warned against. She'd let Emily get attached, then started pulling away, recreating the exact pattern of abandonment the child had already suffered. When she finally walked into the kitchen, Emily's smile was smaller, more cautious. The girl had learned to protect herself, to expect disappointment. Victoria had taught her that in less than 2 weeks. That night, when she finally came home at 10 p.m. after a conference call with the legal team, Marcus was waiting in the living room. His words were quiet but carried steel underneath. We need to talk. Victoria set down her bag, sensing the confrontation coming. It's been a long day, Marcus. Can it wait? The single word cut through her exhaustion. No. She sank onto the couch, suddenly aware of how tired she was. Not just physically, but tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Marcus's voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. You're turning this into a hotel. You come, you go. You treat this place like a temporary stop on your way somewhere more important. Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but he continued. I'm trying to save everything I've worked for. You know what's at stake. His response came back hard. I know what you think is at stake, but what about what's happening here? Emily asked me tonight if you were leaving. She's gotten attached to you, Victoria, and now she's scared you're going to disappear like her mother did. The words hit harder than Victoria expected. She felt her defenses crumbling, the careful walls she'd built threatening to collapse. I never asked her to get attached to me. Marcus's voice softened slightly, but his point remained sharp. That's how it works with children. They don't ask permission. They just love. Victoria's composure shattered. She put her head in her hands, her voice breaking. I don't know how to do this. Any of it. I wasn't built for this kind of life. Marcus sat down across from her, his tone gentler now. Maybe that's the problem. You keep thinking you have to be built for something. Maybe you just have to be present for it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither knew how to say. Later that night, Victoria sat alone in her room, tears falling silently down her face. A soft knock came at her door. Emily stood in the hallway holding a piece of paper, her expression serious. I made this for you, so you won't be sad. Victoria took the drawing with shaking hands. 3 figures stood holding hands, rendered in crayon with the earnest imperfection of childhood art. A tall man with broad shoulders. A small girl with pigtails. A woman with long hair wearing a red dress. Emily's explanation came matter of fact. "That's us. That's our family." Victoria couldn't speak. She pulled the child into a hug, holding on like she was afraid to let go, like Emily was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and uncertain. When Emily finally pulled back, her voice carried innocent hope. "Are you staying, Mom V?" The promise came out before Victoria could think about it, before she could calculate the risks or measure the consequences. "I'm staying." Emily smiled and ran back to bed, leaving Victoria alone with a crayon drawing and a promise she had no idea how to keep. The promise hung in the air long after Emily returned to bed. Victoria sat on the edge of her mattress, the crayon drawing clutched between trembling fingers, and wondered what she'd just committed to. Staying meant more than occupying space in this house. It meant showing up for breakfast, for homework sessions, for bedtime stories. It meant being present in a way she'd never learned, never practiced, never believed herself capable of achieving. Her phone buzzed with another message from Robert Chen. "Board meeting scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Dylan has the votes unless you can prove stability. This is it, Victoria. Last chance." She turned the phone face down and stared at the 3 crayon figures holding hands. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, she'd stopped being Miss Victoria and become Mom V. She hadn't asked for the promotion, hadn't earned it through any metrics she understood. Emily had simply decided it was true, and made it so. Morning arrived too early. Victoria woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Emily singing off-key in the kitchen. She dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, clothes she'd purchased at Target during a lunch break, still foreign against her skin, but less absurd than the designer suits hanging unworn in the closet. Marcus glanced up when she entered the kitchen, his expression unreadable. Emily brightened immediately, patting the chair beside her. "Sit here, Mom V. I'm making a list of stuff we need for the school bake sale." The casual inclusion in family planning felt both natural and terrifying. Victoria sat and accepted the coffee Marcus poured without asking how she took it. He'd already learned she preferred it black with 1 sugar, a detail she hadn't realized he'd been paying attention to. Emily's list was ambitious. "We need flour and sugar and chocolate chips and sprinkles and maybe those little silver balls that make your teeth hurt but look really pretty." Marcus smiled faintly. "We'll see about the silver balls." Victoria found herself volunteering before thinking it through. "I could help with the baking." Both Marcus and Emily turned to look at her. Emily's expression radiated pure joy. Marcus's held something more cautious, like he was watching her make another promise she might not keep. The words came out more certain this time. "I've never baked cookies before, but I can follow instructions. If someone shows me." Emily launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the proper chocolate chip cookie methodology, complete with hand gestures and strong opinions about the ratio of chips to dough. Marcus caught Victoria's eye across the table. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. Week 5 began with grocery shopping. Marcus drove them to the Kroger, Emily chattering from the back seat about which classmates had the best cookies at last year's bake sale and how Sophie Chen's mom had made these amazing lemon bars that everyone loved. Victoria found herself taking mental notes, as if Emily's commentary contained critical business intelligence. Inside the store, Emily grabbed a small shopping cart designed for children and appointed herself official navigator. She led them through the aisles with confident authority, pointing out the best brands of chocolate chips and insisting they needed vanilla extract even though the recipe didn't call for it, because that's what made cookies taste like cookies. Victoria watched Marcus let his daughter take charge, only gently redirecting when her enthusiasm led her toward items they didn't need. The dynamic between them spoke of years of routine, of trust built through consistency. Emily knew her father would listen, but would also set boundaries. She pushed against those boundaries with the confidence of a child who'd never been abandoned or ignored or made to feel her presence was conditional. At the checkout, Emily helped load items onto the conveyor belt, counting under her breath to make sure they hadn't forgotten anything. The cashier, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at the scene. Looks like someone's got a big baking project ahead. Emily's response came proud and certain. My mom and I are making cookies for the school bake sale. The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. The cashier glanced at Victoria, assuming natural connection. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but Victoria saw the slight tension in his shoulders. Emily seemed oblivious to the weight of what she'd said, already moving on to asking if they could get ice cream on the way home. In the car, Victoria waited until Emily was distracted by her tablet before speaking quietly. Should I have corrected her? About the mom thing? Marcus kept his eyes on the road. She's 6. She's creating the family structure that makes sense to her. The non-answer felt like a test Victoria didn't know how to pass. That afternoon, they attempted the cookies. Marcus pulled up a recipe on his phone while Emily assembled ingredients on the counter with meticulous care. Victoria tied on an apron, one of Jennifer's, she realized, seeing the faded monogram, and tried to ignore the weight of wearing a dead woman's clothes. More complicated than business negotiations. That's what baking turned out to be. The butter, softened but not melted. The dry ingredients, sifted to prevent lumps. The chocolate chips, disappearing into Emily's mouth despite multiple warnings. Flour measurement, first attempt. A cloud of white dust, counter covered, hair streaked. Emily dissolved into giggles. Even Marcus smiled, handing over a damp towel with what might have been amusement in his eyes. By the third batch, Victoria had developed a rhythm. Mix the butter and sugar until fluffy. Add eggs one at a time. Fold in flour gradually. Emily supervised with the seriousness of a master chef, occasionally stealing chocolate chips but otherwise providing running commentary on technique. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and sugar, warm and inviting in a way Victoria's sterile penthouse never had. Flour dusted the counters and streaked across Emily's cheek. Marcus leaned against the refrigerator, watching them work, and for a moment Victoria glimpsed what this could be. Not a transaction, not an arrangement, but something real. That evening, after Emily had gone to bed clutching Mr. Whiskers and dreaming of bake sale glory, Victoria helped Marcus clean the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't require constant conversation to avoid awkwardness. Marcus finally spoke while drying the mixing bowl. You did good today. The simple praise hit harder than any quarterly earnings report or board approval ever had. I made a mess. His slight smile acknowledged the truth. That's part of it. The mess, I mean. Real life doesn't have quarterly reports and clean margins. It's just showing up and trying and making mistakes and trying again. Victoria rinsed soap from a measuring cup, processing his words. Emily called me her mom today, at the grocery store. Marcus set down the bowl. I heard. The question came out quieter. Does it bother you? That she's replacing Jennifer? His response was immediate and firm. She's not replacing anyone. Children don't work that way. They just expand their capacity to love. It's adults who put limitations on it, who decide love is finite and must be rationed. The words settled into Victoria like seeds finding soil, foreign but potentially transformative. Week 6 brought parent-teacher conference night. Victoria had assumed this would be Marcus's territory alone, but Emily had other ideas. She announced at breakfast that both her parents needed to come because Mrs. Thompson wanted to meet families and talk about second semester goals. Marcus caught Victoria's eye across the table, a silent question in his expression. She could decline. Make an excuse about work. Let him handle this alone like he'd handled everything alone for 3 years. Instead, she heard herself agreeing. What time should we be there? Emily's face lit up like Victoria had just promised her Disney World. Riverside Elementary smelled like crayons and floor cleaner. Emily led them down hallways decorated with student artwork, pointing out her contributions with obvious pride. Other parents moved through the corridors, some looking harried and exhausted, others engaged in animated conversation with their children. Mrs. Thompson, 50s, warm eyes, patient demeanor earned through decades of teaching 6-year-olds. She shook hands with Marcus first, clearly familiar with him from previous conferences, then turned to Victoria with polite curiosity. "And you must be Emily's mother." The assumption landed like a challenge. Victoria's mouth opened, ready to correct the record, to explain the complicated arrangement, to establish appropriate boundaries. Emily's small hand slipped into hers. Trusting, certain. The correction died on her lips. "Victoria Pierce, it's nice to meet you." Mrs. Thompson smiled and gestured them toward chairs clearly designed for much smaller people. Emily perched between them, swinging her legs and looking pleased with herself. The conference covered standard topics. Emily's reading level was above grade standard. Her math skills were developing well. She sometimes got distracted during quiet work time, but always completed assignments with enthusiasm. Mrs. Thompson spoke about Emily's kindness toward other students, her creativity during art projects, her tendency to ask thoughtful questions during science lessons. Then she shifted topics, her voice gentler. "I've noticed a change in Emily over the past few weeks. She seems happier, more settled. Whatever you're doing at home, it's working." Victoria felt Marcus tense slightly beside her. They both knew what she meant. Emily had been carrying the weight of her mother's death for 3 years, and something had shifted. But Thompson continued, directing her comments toward Victoria. "She talks about you often. Mom V helps with homework. Mom V makes funny voices during stories. Mom V is learning to bake cookies." The litany of small moments, trivial and enormous all at once, threatened to overwhelm Victoria. She managed to nod, not trusting her voice. Walking back to the car, Emily chattered about how Mrs. Thompson was the best teacher and how next week they were starting a unit on butterflies and could they maybe get a butterfly garden for the backyard. Marcus promised to look into it. Victoria stayed quiet, processing the strange reality that a teacher she'd never met knew details about her daily life with a child who wasn't technically hers. That night, after Emily was asleep, Marcus found Victoria standing in the backyard, staring at the sky. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside her, letting the silence stretch. Finally, Victoria spoke. "I didn't correct her. Mrs. Thompson thought I was Emily's mother, and I just let her believe it." Marcus's voice came steady. "Would correcting her have made Emily feel better? Or you?" The question cut to the heart of something Victoria had been avoiding. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm helping or hurting or just playing pretend at something I don't understand." He turned to face her fully. "You think I knew what I was doing when Jennifer died? I was terrified every single day. Still am, most days. Terrified I'm screwing it up, that Emily will grow up damaged because I don't know how to be both parents." The admission surprised her. Marcus always seemed so certain, so grounded. His words continued. "But I show up anyway. That's all any parent can do. Show up and try and hope it's enough." Victoria thought about her own mother, who'd stopped showing up one random Tuesday morning. She thought about Harrison Pierce, who'd shown up physically but never emotionally, treating his daughter like a quarterly report requiring constant revision. The possibility that simply being present could be enough felt revolutionary and impossible in equal measure. Week 7 brought complications. Dylan Pierce had been busy. Robert Chen called during dinner. Victoria had started silencing her phone during meals, but the repeated buzzing drew Marcus's attention. She excused herself to the porch, Emily's disappointed expression following her out. Chen's voice crackled with barely controlled panic. "Dylan leaked photos to the business press. You washing a car, shopping at a grocery store, looking very domestic with some guy and a kid. He's spinning it as a mental breakdown, saying you've abandoned your responsibilities to play house in the suburbs." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What photos? How did he—" The explanation came rapid fire. Private investigator. Been following you for weeks, apparently. The Wall Street Journal is running a profile tomorrow, questioning your fitness to lead. The board wants answers, Victoria. They want you back in New York immediately to address this. Through the window, Victoria could see Marcus helping Emily with fractions, their heads bent together over her homework. The scene looked peaceful, ordinary, completely at odds with the crisis exploding through her phone. Her response came out tired. "Tell the board I'll address their concerns, but I'm not leaving." Chen's voice rose. "Victoria, they're talking about removing you before the inheritance deadline even matters. Dylan has 6 votes. You need to come back and fight for this." She ended the call without responding and stood on the porch for a long moment, watching her breath fog in the October evening air. Inside, Emily laughed at something Marcus said. The sound carried through the window like an accusation. When she returned to the kitchen, both Marcus and Emily were watching her. Emily's expression held concern beyond her years. Marcus's face remained carefully neutral. Victoria forced a smile. Just work stuff. Nothing important. The lie tasted bitter. But what was she supposed to say? That her cousin was trying to destroy her reputation? That board members were questioning her sanity? That in 3 weeks she'd have to defend her choices to people who saw Emily and Marcus as distractions rather than the first real thing she'd felt in 27 years? Marcus didn't push, but his eyes held questions he was too polite to ask. Morning arrived with 17 missed calls, 43 text messages. The Wall Street Journal article had dropped at 6 a.m. Eastern. The headline, "Pierce Development CEO's Mystery Absence Raises Questions About Leadership Stability." Brutal. That was the only word for it. Her sudden disappearance from corporate headquarters. Her secretive living arrangement with an unidentified man. Her erratic behavior in recent board meetings. Dylan quoted extensively, expressing deep concern, while simultaneously suggesting she was unfit to lead. Worst were the photos. Victoria pushing a shopping cart at Kroger. Victoria and Emily washing Marcus's car, both of them laughing. Victoria sitting on the front porch, phone pressed to her ear, looking exhausted. The images captured her life here but stripped it of context, made it look like escapism rather than transformation. Her phone rang again. David Morrison, her lawyer. His voice was grim. "We need to talk about damage control. The board is furious. They're saying you've been lying about where you are, what you're doing. Dylan's painting himself as the responsible family member trying to protect the company from your instability." Victoria stared at the photos on her phone screen. In one, she had flour in her hair from the baking session. She looked disheveled, distracted, nothing like the polished CEO who normally graced business publications. The question came out flat. What do they want? Morrison's response was blunt. Proof. Proof that you're not having a breakdown. Proof that whatever you're doing serves the company's interests. And they want it in 3 weeks when the emergency board meeting convenes. After the call ended, Victoria sat in her guest room surrounded by the trappings of her temporary life. Emily's drawings taped to the wall, a bookmark in a children's book she'd been reading. The Target clothes hanging beside her designer suits like artifacts from parallel universes. She could go back to New York, face the board, spin this as a strategic retreat, a necessary break to prepare for the challenges ahead, hire better PR people, manage the narrative, save the company. But saving the company meant leaving Emily, leaving Marcus, proving Dylan right that this had been a temporary aberration, a lapse in judgment rather than a genuine attempt at building something real. Marcus found her an hour later, still sitting on the bed staring at nothing. He didn't ask what was wrong, just sat beside her and waited. The confession spilled out. "My cousin leaked photos. The Wall Street Journal ran a story questioning my sanity. The board wants me back in New York in 3 weeks to prove I'm not having a mental breakdown." Marcus absorbed this information quietly. "What are you going to do?" Victoria looked at him. This man who'd offered her an impossible bargain and somehow made it feel like salvation. I don't know. If I go back, I lose this. If I stay, I lose everything I've worked for. His response came measured. You mean you lose everything your father told you to work for? That's not the same thing. The distinction hit like a slap. Harrison Pierce's voice echoed through Victoria's memory, always demanding more, always finding her lacking, always moving the goalposts just when she thought she'd finally arrived. Marcus continued, I can't tell you what to choose, but I can tell you Emily's already attached. If you leave now, it will hurt her. She'll think she did something wrong, that she wasn't enough to make you stay. The parallel to Victoria's own childhood landed with devastating precision. She'd spent 27 years believing her mother left because Victoria wasn't worth staying for. Now she stood at a crossroads where she could either inflict that same wound on Emily or sacrifice the empire she'd built trying to prove she deserved to exist. That evening, Victoria worked late into the night, taking calls in her room while the house slept around her. She spoke with Robert Chen about Q4 projections. She reviewed contracts for the Montana Development Project. She answered emails from Tokyo investors and London partners. At 2 a.m., she emerged to find Marcus in the kitchen, drinking tea at the table. He gestured to the kettle. Want some? She nodded, too tired to speak. He poured her a cup and they sat in silence, the house creaking softly around them. Finally, Marcus broke the quiet. You're going back, aren't you? It wasn't a question. Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I don't know. The board meeting is in 3 weeks. I have to show up for that, or Dylan wins by default. Marcus's voice stayed even. And after the meeting? The future stretched ahead, uncertain and terrifying. I don't know that either. He stood to leave, then paused. Emily's birthday is in 3 weeks, November 15th. She's been planning it for months. She wants you there. The timing couldn't have been worse. The board meeting was scheduled for November 14th. Even if everything went perfectly, Victoria would be fighting for her professional life while Emily waited for her to show up with birthday cake and presents. The next 2 weeks became a blur of competing demands. Victoria tried to maintain her presence in Emily's life while managing the corporate crisis from afar. She attended the school Halloween parade dressed as a witch, Emily's idea, while fielding conference calls about damage control strategies. She helped Emily practice multiplication tables while reviewing legal briefs about corporate governance. Marcus watched it all with growing concern, but said nothing. His silence felt more condemning than any argument. By week 8, the strain was showing. Victoria missed dinner 3 nights in a row, locked in her room on video conferences with board members trying to smooth Dylan's latest attacks. She forgot about Emily's school project on ocean animals until Marcus quietly mentioned it the night before it was due. She snapped at Emily for interrupting a call, then spent an hour apologizing while the child assured her it was okay in a voice that suggested she'd learned to expect disappointment. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Victoria had promised to take Emily to see the new animated movie about talking animals. Emily had been excited for days, had drawn pictures of the characters, had practiced the songs. But Robert Chen called with news that couldn't wait. One of Pierce Development's major investors was pulling out, spooked by the negative press. Victoria needed to get on a call with the investment team immediately to prevent a cascade of withdrawals. She found Emily waiting by the door in her coat, clutching the tickets Marcus had printed. The words came out hollow. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Something came up at work. We'll have to reschedule. Emily's face crumpled. She didn't cry, which somehow made it worse. She just nodded and walked back to her room, the tickets falling from her hand onto the floor. Marcus picked them up, his expression carefully blank. I'll take her. Victoria wanted to protest, to explain how critical this call was, how much money was at stake, how Dylan was using every opportunity to undermine her credibility. But the words died in her throat because she knew how it sounded. She knew what she was choosing, and it wasn't Emily. She took the call in her room, spent 3 hours negotiating with investors, salvaging the deal through sheer force of will and strategic concessions. When she finally emerged, the house was dark. Marcus and Emily had come home from the movie and gone to bed without saying goodnight. Victoria stood in the hallway outside Emily's door, listening to the child's soft breathing, and felt something crack inside her chest. The next morning, Emily was quieter than usual, not angry, just careful. She'd learned to protect herself, to not expect too much. The realization made Victoria feel physically ill. After breakfast, Victoria asked Emily to come sit with her on the couch. "I'm sorry about yesterday, about the movie. You deserved better." The apology scraped her throat raw. Emily shrugged with 6-year-old stoicism. "It's okay. Daddy said you had important work." The words hit like knives. "It's not okay. You're important too. You're more important." Emily's gaze held understanding beyond her years. "Then why did you choose the other thing?" Victoria had no answer that would make sense to a child who only understood presence or absence, promised or broken. That night, after Emily was asleep, Victoria sat Marcus down in the living room. Her voice shook, but remained determined. "I need to tell you something." Marcus waited, patient as always. The confession spilled out in a rush. "The board meeting is November 14th. I have to be there. If I don't show up, Dylan wins everything. But that's the day before Emily's birthday, and I don't know if I can do both. I don't know if I can be in New York fighting for the company and be here for her party. And I'm terrified that if I choose wrong, I'll lose everything that matters." Silence. Long. Heavy. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice carried weight accumulated over weeks of watching. "Let me ask you something, Victoria. If you win this fight, if you save the company and prove Dylan wrong and keep your father's empire, will that be enough? Will it finally fill whatever hole you've been trying to fill for 27 years? The question stripped away every defense she'd built, gentler now. Or will there just be another fight, another person to prove wrong, another impossible standard to meet? When does it end? Victoria felt tears burning her eyes. "I don't know how to stop. I've been running toward this finish line my entire life. I don't know who I am if I'm not trying to be good enough." Marcus moved to sit beside her, not touching but present. "Maybe that's what this is about. Not proving you're good enough for your father or the board or Dylan, just figuring out who you are when nobody's keeping score." The words settled into Victoria like truth she'd been avoiding. She thought about Harrison Pierce, dead 3 months but still controlling her life through conditions and requirements. She thought about Dylan, waiting for her to fail so he could claim what he believed was rightfully his. She thought about the board members who saw her as an asset to be managed rather than a person deserving of basic human consideration. Then she thought about Emily, who loved her not because of her accomplishments or her wealth or her strategic value, but simply because she showed up and tried and made funny voices during bedtime stories. The realization hit with devastating clarity. She'd been fighting the wrong battle. Morning, phone calls, starting with David Morrison. "I need you to draw up papers relinquishing my claim to the inheritance." Steady, certain. Shock crackled through the line. "I'm sorry, what?" Slower this time. "I'm giving it up. The company, the properties, everything covered under my father's will. I want to sign it over to Dylan." The lawyer's response was immediate and forceful. "Victoria, do you understand what you're saying? We're talking about an estate worth $340 million. Everything your father built, everything you helped build, you would be handing it to Dylan on a silver platter." "I understand perfectly." Calm. Final. Decided. Morrison tried again. "Then help me understand why. What changed? Is this about the press coverage? The board pressure? Because we can fight this." She cut him off. "My father spent his whole life building an empire. And when he died, He used it to control me one last time, to tell me that without a child, without a family on his terms, I was worthless. The words came easier now, like poison draining from a wound. I spent the last 2 months living in a small house with a man and his daughter. I learned to bake cookies. I read bedtime stories. I went to parent-teacher conferences. And I realized that the life I was fighting so hard to keep was never really mine. It was my father's life, his vision, his legacy. I was just the vessel he expected to carry it forward. Morrison was silent for a long moment. And what will you do instead? Victoria looked out the window at the suburban street, at the house across the way where the Patels were loading their car for a Saturday trip, at the sidewalk where neighborhood kids were drawing chalk pictures. Her answer came quiet, but certain. I don't know yet, but for the first time, it will be my choice. Morrison agreed to prepare the documents. The next call went to Robert Chen. The CFO's reaction was more emotional. You can't be serious. Victoria, I've worked with you for 8 years. I've watched you build this company into something extraordinary. Don't let Dylan and his smear campaign win. She kept her voice gentle. This isn't about winning or losing, Robert. It's about choosing a different game. Chen tried every argument he could marshal. The employees who depended on her leadership, the projects that would die under Dylan's mismanagement, the legacy she was abandoning. Each point landed, hurt, but didn't change her mind. Finally, he asked, what about the Tokyo investors, the Montana project, the expansion into renewable energy development? You're just walking away from all of it? Victoria thought about the spreadsheets and projections, the strategic plans and market analyses. None of it had ever made her feel the way Emily's laugh did when they made cookies together. Her response was simple. Yes. The third call went to Dylan Pierce. He answered on the first ring, his voice smug. Finally ready to come back to reality, cousin? She ignored the jab. I'm signing over the inheritance. David Morrison will send you the papers early next week. It's yours, Dylan. All of it. The silence on the other end stretched so long she thought the call had dropped. Then Dylan's voice came back, confused and wary. What's the catch? There was no catch, no hidden clause, no strategic play. Her words came out steady. No catch. You wanted it. You can have it. I hope it makes you happy. Dylan's response carried uncertainty rather than triumph. The board will think I forced you out. This makes me look like a villain. Victoria almost laughed at the irony. That's your problem now, Dylan. Good luck. She ended the call and sat in her room surrounded by packed suitcases and the remains of her corporate life. The relief that washed over her felt physical, like setting down a weight she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. That evening, she found Marcus in the garage working on Emily's bicycle. The training wheels needed adjusting before winter came. She waited until he looked up. I did it. I signed away the company. Marcus set down his wrench. Just like that? Her voice shook slightly. Just like that. Dylan gets everything. The empire. The legacy. All of it. He studied her face. How do you feel? Victoria sat on an overturned bucket, processing the question. Terrified. Relieved. Free. Like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling. Marcus's slight smile carried understanding. Maybe both. They sat in comfortable silence, the garage smelling of oil and metal and possibility. Finally, Victoria spoke again. I still have to go to New York on the 14th. There are papers to sign, meetings to handle the transition. But I'll be back for Emily's birthday. I promise. Marcus's response was careful. She'll hold you to that. Victoria nodded, knowing the weight of promises made to children. I know. November 14th, 6 a.m., departure to New York. At 5, Victoria stood in Emily's doorway. The child slept with Mr. Whiskers tucked under her chin. Tomorrow afternoon, birthday party. Cake from the bakery Emily had chosen. Decorations in purple and silver. 12 classmates invited. The promise felt heavier than any contract she'd ever signed. A stirring, sensing presence in the doorway, eyes opening, foggy with sleep. "Are you leaving?" Victoria knelt beside the bed, brushing hair from Emily's forehead. "Just for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, before your party starts. I promise." The child's expression held doubt earned through experience. "What if something happens? What if you can't come back?" The fear was specific, grounded in loss Emily understood too well. Children who'd watched their mothers drive away and never return learned to expect abandonment. Victoria took Emily's small hand in hers. "Nothing will stop me from being here tomorrow. Not work, not meetings, not anything. You're more important than all of it." Emily studied her face with those devastatingly perceptive eyes. "Do you promise? Promise? Like the kind you can't break?" The distinction mattered in Emily's world. Regular promises could bend under adult complications, but promises were sacred. "I promise. Promise." Emily seemed satisfied, settling back into her pillow. "Okay. I'm gonna hold you to that, Mom V." The nickname still caught Victoria off guard, still made something warm and terrifying bloom in her chest. Marcus drove her to the airport in pre-dawn darkness. They didn't speak much. Everything important had been said already. At departures, he put the car in park and turned to face her. His words came quiet but firm. "Don't let them make you feel small. Whatever happens in those meetings, remember you're choosing to walk away. That's not weakness." Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. She grabbed her carry-on and stepped out into the cold November morning, leaving behind the only place that had felt like home in 27 years. The Pierce Development Corporation headquarters occupied 15 floors of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. Victoria walked through the lobby at 9 a.m., her heels clicking on marble floors she'd walked 1,000 times before. Everything looked the same. The modern art installations, the reception desk with its polished granite surface, the elevator banks with their brushed steel doors. But she felt different, like she'd returned to a museum dedicated to someone else's life. Robert Chen met her on the executive floor, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. "The conference room is ready. Dylan's already here with his lawyers. David Morrison is waiting in your office." Victoria followed him down hallways lined with photos of completed developments: the Montana Resort Project, the Boston waterfront renovation, the Sustainable Housing Initiative in Philadelphia. Each image represented thousands of hours of work, millions of dollars in investment, pieces of the empire Harrison Pierce had built and expected her to expand. She felt nothing looking at them. The buildings were impressive, the accomplishments real, but they belonged to a version of herself she was actively leaving behind. David Morrison stood when she entered her office, his 65-year-old face creased with worry. "I've prepared the documents as you requested. But Victoria, I'm begging you to reconsider. Once you sign these papers, there's no going back. Dylan will have complete control." Victoria sat behind her desk for what she knew would be the last time. The view from the 42nd floor stretched across Manhattan, buildings and bridges and the distant shimmer of the Hudson River. She'd spent countless hours in this chair, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions in capital. Her response came steady. "I know what I'm signing, David. Let's get this done." The conference room. More people than Victoria expected. At the head of the table, Dylan with 3 lawyers flanking him. Board representatives. CFO Chen. General Counsel Patricia Webb. 2 outside directors who'd flown in specifically for this. Everyone tense. Everyone uncertain about what was about to happen. Dylan's expression held wariness rather than triumph. Won the game but confused about the rules. Victoria, I didn't think you'd actually go through with the... She took a seat across from him. Then you don't know me as well as you thought. Patricia Webb cleared her throat. Before we proceed, I need to understand the terms. You're relinquishing all claims to the inheritance outlined in Harrison Pierce's will. This includes majority ownership of Pierce Development Corporation, the associated real estate holdings, and the personal assets designated for the heir. In exchange, you receive... Victoria's answer was simple. Nothing. I'm not negotiating. Dylan gets it all, exactly as my father intended if I failed to meet the conditions. The lawyers exchanged glances. This wasn't how corporate successions worked. There should be negotiations, settlements, face-saving mechanisms. People didn't just walk away from 9-figure inheritances. Dylan leaned forward. Why? I need to understand why you're doing this. Victoria looked at her cousin, really looked at him, for the first time in years. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the pressure he carried trying to live up to expectations that had crushed them both. Harrison Pierce had pitted them against each other, made them fight for scraps of approval that were never actually on the table. Her voice came out gentler than she intended. Because I'm tired, Dylan. Tired of proving myself to a dead man. Tired of building someone else's vision. Tired of winning games that don't actually matter. Dylan's face showed genuine confusion. This is a $340 million empire. How does that not matter? The question hung in the air. Victoria thought about how to explain what she'd learned in 2 months of washing dishes and reading bedtime stories and helping with homework. How did you quantify the value of Emily's laugh? How did you measure the worth of Marcus's steady presence? How did you put a price on becoming someone who could be trusted with a promise? Promise. She couldn't. So she didn't try. It matters to you. That's enough. Take it, run the company, make it yours. I hope it gives you what you're looking for. The signing took 45 minutes. Each document required multiple signatures, witness attestations, legal acknowledgments. Victoria signed her name over and over, watching her claim to Pierce Development dissolve with each stroke of the pen. The lawyers verified everything, ensuring no loopholes remained, no claims she could later make. Robert Chen's hands shook as he witnessed the final document. I've worked with you for 8 years, Victoria. This company won't be the same without you. She managed a small smile. Maybe that's not a bad thing. When the last signature was complete, Dylan sat back in his chair looking shell-shocked. He'd spent months undermining Victoria, leaking photos, courting board members, positioning himself as the responsible alternative. Now he'd won, and victory seemed to taste like ashes in his mouth. Patricia Webb broke the silence. The transition will take approximately 90 days to complete fully. Dylan, you'll need to work with Robert on the operational handover. Victoria, your personal items from this office can be shipped to any address you provide. Victoria stood, suddenly eager to be gone. I'll collect what I need today. Everything else can go to charity. She walked back to her office alone. The space felt sterile now, impersonal despite 3 years of occupancy. She pulled a few items from the drawers, a fountain pen Jennifer had given Marcus that he'd passed to her, a photo of Emily and Marcus she'd printed and kept hidden in a folder, her Harvard Business School diploma that suddenly seemed irrelevant. Everything else, the awards, the framed deals, the luxury accessories, belonged to the person she used to be. In the doorway, Dylan, his 3 lawyers conspicuously absent. Can we talk, just us? Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk. 37 years old, but looking younger, stripped of the aggressive confidence he usually projected. I didn't want it to be like this. The words came halting. The leaked photos, the press attacks, that was my father's idea. Before Uncle Harrison died, my dad told me I had to fight for this, that the Pierce family fortune shouldn't go to... He trailed off. Victoria could fill in the blanks. Shouldn't go to a woman. Shouldn't go to Harrison's daughter when a nephew was available. The old patriarchal logic that had poisoned their family for generations. Dylan continued. My father died 8 years ago. Left me $2 million in debt from bad investments. Uncle Harrison promised to clear it if I challenged you, if I proved you weren't fit to lead. He wanted you to earn it the hard way, wanted to see if you were strong enough. The revelation landed without surprise. Harrison Pierce had manipulated them both, turned family into competition, used Dylan as a tool to test Victoria even after death. Victoria's voice came out tired. And now you have it. Was it worth it? Dylan looked down at his hands. I don't know yet. Ask me in a year when I'm drowning in board meetings and quarterly projections. I'm not you, Victoria. I don't have your vision or your drive. I'll probably run this company into the ground. The honest fear in his voice made him human for the first time in Victoria's memory. Then hire people who do have those things. Make it better than Uncle Harrison ever did. Break the cycle. Dylan met her eyes. Is that what you're doing? Breaking the cycle? Victoria thought about Emily, about the promise she'd made that morning. I'm trying. They sat in silence for a moment, two people shaped by the same toxic legacy, finally seeing each other clearly. Dylan stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you look happier than I've ever seen you. Whatever you found out there in the suburbs, I hope it's real. After he left, Victoria finished packing her few belongings into a single box. She walked through the office one last time, saying goodbye to assistants and junior staff who looked confused and concerned. Most had no idea what had just happened, only that something fundamental had shifted. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Victoria watched the floor numbers descend, each one taking her further from the life she'd built and closer to something undefined and terrifying. On the ground floor, she passed the security desk where she'd badged in thousands of times. The guard, Marcus Williams, no relation to her Marcus, looked up in surprise. Leaving early today, Ms. Pierce? She handed him her building access card. Leaving for good, Marcus. Take care. His expression showed shock, but she was already pushing through the revolving doors onto 6th Avenue. The November wind hit her face, cold and sharp. People rushed past on their way to meetings and lunches and important business. Victoria stood on the sidewalk holding a small box of personal items, having just walked away from more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. She felt lighter than she had in years. The flight back to Boston departed at 8 p.m. Victoria sat in the airport terminal watching planes take off and land, her mind quiet for the first time in months. No emails demanding attention, no calls to return, no crises requiring immediate intervention. She'd turned in her company phone during the transition meeting. Her personal phone sat silent in her purse. She pulled out the photo of Emily and Marcus, studying their faces. Emily grinned at the camera, gap-toothed and joyful. Marcus stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder, protective and present. They'd taken it at a school picnic 3 weeks ago. Victoria had insisted on being the photographer, uncomfortable being in the frame herself. Now she wished she'd joined them, wished she had physical evidence of her place in their life. The phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Victoria almost ignored it, then reconsidered and answered. A woman's voice came through, professional and slightly uncertain. Miss Pierce, this is Catherine Wu. Dylan Pierce gave me your number. I wanted to introduce myself. I've just been named CEO of Pierce Development Corporation. Victoria processed this information quickly. Catherine Wu was a legend in sustainable development, had turned around 3 failing companies, commanded respect throughout the industry. Dylan had moved fast. Congratulations, that's an excellent choice. Catherine's voice warmed slightly. Dylan said you recommended reaching out. I wanted to ask, would you be willing to consult during the transition? Not formally, just occasional calls to help me understand the landscape? I'd compensate you fairly, of course. The offer was generous, professional, everything Victoria would have jumped at a month ago. Now she looked at the photo in her hand and knew her answer. I appreciate the offer, Catherine, but I'm moving in a different direction. Dylan can answer most of your questions, and Robert Chen knows the operational details better than I ever did. Catherine accepted this gracefully. I understand. For what it's worth, I've been following your career for years. What you built at Pierce was impressive. I hope whatever comes next brings you fulfillment. After ending the call, Victoria sat with the weight of that final severing. No consulting, no advisory role, no safety net. She was truly walking away. The plane touched down in Boston at 10:47 p.m. Victoria took a cab to the suburban house, arriving just before midnight. The lights were off except for the porch lamp Marcus always left burning. She used the key he'd given her during week 3 and stepped into the quiet house. Marcus appeared in the hallway wearing sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his hair rumpled from sleep. You're back. Relief flooded through her. I promised. He stepped closer, searching her face. How did it go? Victoria set down her box of belongings. It's done. I signed everything. Dylan has the company. Catherine Wu is the new CEO. I'm officially unemployed for the first time since college. Marcus pulled her into a hug, and Victoria let herself lean into his solid warmth. She didn't cry. There was nothing to mourn. Instead, she felt the strange peace of having finally stopped running. When they pulled apart, Marcus kept his hands on her shoulders. Emily will be thrilled you're here for her birthday. She's been planning it all day. Insisted we make purple cupcakes because that's your favorite color. She'd mentioned purple once in passing. Emily remembered. Of course she remembered. The child made space for Victoria in everything now. Purple isn't actually my favorite color. Marcus's expression showed confusion. It's not? She smiled. It is now. Morning came with Emily launching herself onto Victoria's bed at 6:30 a.m., wide awake and vibrating with birthday excitement. You came back! You're really here! Victoria pulled the child into a hug, breathing in the scent of Johnson's baby shampoo and sleep. I told you I would. Promises don't break. Emily's grin could have powered the eastern seaboard. I'm 7 now. I'm basically a grown-up. Marcus appeared in the doorway holding a plate of birthday pancakes shaped like the number 7. Basically a grown-up who still needs to eat breakfast before the party. The day unfolded in controlled chaos. Streamers appeared throughout the house, purple and silver balloons clustered in corners. Marcus assembled a chocolate cake with slightly crooked frosting that Emily declared perfect. Victoria helped set up folding tables in the backyard, string lights between trees, arrange goodie bags filled with small toys and candy. 2 p.m. Arrival time. 12 7-year-olds descended with the energy of a small tornado. Pinned the tail on the donkey. Musical chairs disputes. Face-painting duty, despite having zero artistic ability. Butterflies. Superheroes. Flowers. Each child critiqued her work with brutal honesty. Emily presided over the whole scene with proprietary pride, introducing Victoria to each guest. This is my mom, V. She used to be really important in New York, but now she lives here with us. The casual way Emily claimed her, owned their relationship, left Victoria speechless. Zoe Chen, daughter of Robert Chen, Victoria realized with a start, pulled Victoria aside during cake cutting. Are you really Emily's mom? She talks about you all the time, but I thought her mom died. The question came from innocent curiosity, not malice. Victoria knelt to Zoe's level. Emily's first mom died. I'm her second mom. Some kids are lucky enough to have more than one. Zoe considered this with 7-year-old logic. That makes sense. My dad has 2 dads because his first dad wasn't very nice, so my grandma married someone better. Children's ability to accept complexity without judgment never ceased to amaze Victoria. Adults spent years in therapy processing step-parent dynamics. Kids just incorporated it into their worldview and moved on. The party wound down as parents arrived for pickup. Victoria found herself in conversations about school policies and pediatrician recommendations, and whether the flu shot was worth getting this early in the season. Suburban parent small talk she'd once considered beneath her now felt oddly grounding. After the last guest departed, Emily collapsed on the couch, surrounded by presents. "Best birthday ever!" Marcus surveyed the wreckage of streamers and cake crumbs and discarded paper plates. "Glad you enjoyed it, birthday girl. Want to open presents before or after we clean this up?" Emily's answer was immediate. "Before. Definitely before." Victoria sat beside her on the couch, watching the child tear into packages with enthusiastic abandon. Books and art supplies and a remote control car that would definitely get banned from indoor use within 48 hours. Emily exclaimed over each gift with genuine delight, already planning how she'd use everything. The final present came from Victoria, a butterfly garden kit she'd ordered weeks ago, back when she still believed she might not make it to this moment. Emily opened the box and gasped. "We can grow real butterflies. Mom V, this is perfect." The child threw her arms around Victoria's neck, and Victoria held her close, memorizing the weight and warmth of this moment. 7 years old. A birthday party survived. A promise kept. After Emily went to bed, Victoria and Marcus cleaned the backyard in comfortable silence. They collected abandoned cups and deflated balloons, took down streamers, wiped purple frosting from surfaces it had no business being on. Marcus broke the quiet first. "So what happens now? You don't have a job. You gave away your inheritance. What's the plan?" Victoria had been avoiding this question, living in the moment because the future felt too large and undefined. "I don't know yet. I have some savings that'll last a few months. I need to figure out what I actually want to do with my life instead of what I was told I should want." He handed her a trash bag. "That's terrifying." She took it, their fingers brushing. "Completely." Marcus's voice dropped lower. "You know you can stay here. As long as you need. Emily would be devastated if you left now." The offer hung between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to name. "Just Emily?" His eyes met hers, and something passed between them that had been building for weeks. "No, not just Emily." Victoria's heart hammered in her chest. They stood in the backyard surrounded by birthday party debris, having one of the most important conversations of her life in the most mundane setting imaginable. Her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Dylan's name on the screen. Instinct made her answer. "Victoria, we have a problem." Agitation crackled through the line. "Catherine Wu just called and she found irregularities in the Montana project financing. Looks like someone's been skimming funds. She needs the original contracts you negotiated. Wants to know if you noticed anything suspicious." Her business mind kicked in automatically, running through possibilities. The Montana contracts are in the system. Patricia Webb should have access. She needs to talk to you specifically. You were the one who negotiated the deal. Please, Victoria. I know you walked away, but this could sink the company before I even get started. Just one call to help Catherine understand what she's looking at. The old pull was there, the urge to fix problems, to be needed, to prove she was still valuable. Victoria looked at Marcus watching her from across the yard, then at the house where Emily slept dreaming of butterflies. Her answer came clear. "Tell Catherine to send me the documents. I'll review them tomorrow and send her notes. But that's it, Dylan. I'm not consulting. I'm not coming back. I'm just helping her understand what I already built so she can make her own decisions." Dylan's relief was palpable. "Thank you. Seriously, thank you." After ending the call, Victoria found Marcus still watching her with an unreadable expression. His question came carefully. Are you sure about staying away from it all? Victoria crossed the yard to stand in front of him. I'm sure. That life is done. I just need to figure out what the new one looks like. Marcus reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture intimate and terrifying. Maybe we figure it out together. The kiss happened without planning, without strategy, without any of the careful calculation Victoria usually applied to important decisions. Marcus's lips were warm against hers, his hand gentle on her face. The kiss tasted like possibility and risk and something that might be hope. When they pulled apart, that complicates things. Her voice shook. Marcus's slight smile held warmth. Good things usually do. They stood in the backyard under string lights meant for a 7-year-old's birthday party, having crossed a line that changed everything. Victoria had walked away from an empire. Now she was walking towards something she didn't have words for yet, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Inside the house, Emily slept peacefully, dreaming of butterflies and birthday cake. Tomorrow would bring new questions, new challenges, new territory to navigate. But tonight, Victoria let herself stand in this moment, unemployed, untethered, uncertain, and somehow more grounded than she'd ever been. The next morning brought coffee and pancakes and Emily's immediate observation. You and Daddy are being weird. Marcus nearly choked on his orange juice. Victoria focused intently on her breakfast, feeling 17 instead of 34. Emily's eyes narrowed with the detective skills of a perceptive 7-year-old. Did something happen? Are you guys fighting? Victoria managed to find her voice. No, sweetheart, we're not fighting. The child's expression shifted to something calculating. Are you dating? Zoe's mom and dad dated before they got married. Do people your age still date? Marcus intervened with parental authority. Emily, finish your breakfast. And yes, people our age still date. Emily processed this information with satisfaction. Good. Because if you guys get married, Mom V will be here forever. That's how it works. The casual certainty in Emily's voice, the assumption that of course they would get married, of course Victoria would stay forever, made the future feel simultaneously inevitable and impossible. After dropping Emily at school, Marcus and Victoria returned to the quiet house. The conversation they needed to have hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Marcus spoke first. We should probably talk about last night. Victoria sat on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. Probably. He joined her, maintaining careful distance. I don't want to rush this. Whatever this is, you just walked away from your entire life. You need time to figure out who you are when you're not fighting for your father's approval. The words made sense. Victoria knew he was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally remained different things. What if I don't want time? What if I'm tired of being careful and strategic and planning every move 3 steps ahead? Marcus's expression showed understanding mixed with caution. Then we still go slow. Because Emily's involved now, and her heart is on the line. If we do this and it falls apart, she's the one who gets hurt. The reminder hit home. Victoria thought about Emily's casual certainty this morning, the way she'd already folded Victoria into her permanent family structure. Children didn't have contingency plans. They just loved completely and expected that love to be permanent. Her voice came out small. I would never hurt her intentionally. Marcus reached over and took her hand. I know, but intention doesn't always matter. People hurt each other even when they're trying not to. Jennifer didn't intend to die and leave Emily motherless, but here we are. The parallel was clear. Life offered no guarantees. Love was always a risk. Victoria squeezed his hand. So what do we do? His answer was simple. We take it one day at a time. We're honest with each other. We don't make promises we can't keep, and we protect Emily above everything else. The framework made sense, cautious, reasonable, designed to minimize damage. Victoria nodded her agreement, even as part of her wanted to throw caution aside and leap without looking. That afternoon, she reviewed the Montana project documents Dylan had sent. The irregularities Catherine Wu had found were subtle but significant. Funds redirected through shell companies, invoices for materials that were never delivered, labor costs inflated beyond reasonable margins. Someone had been systematically stealing from Pierce Development for at least 18 months. Victoria compiled notes and sent them to Catherine with recommendations for forensic accountants to hire. She felt the familiar pull of problem-solving, the satisfaction of applying her expertise to complex challenges. But when she closed the laptop, she also felt relief that it was someone else's problem now. Her phone rang again, this time an unknown number. Victoria answered cautiously. A warm female voice came through. "Ms. Pierce, this is Amanda Reeves from Boston Community Development Alliance. I heard through the grapevine that you might be looking for new opportunities. We're a nonprofit focused on affordable housing initiatives. I'd love to buy you coffee and discuss whether there might be a fit." The offer surprised Victoria. "How did you hear I was available?" Amanda's laugh was genuine. "Robert Chen sits on our board. He suggested I reach out. No pressure, just a conversation. We're always looking for people with development expertise who actually care about the community impact." Victoria found herself agreeing to coffee the following Tuesday. As she ended the call, she realized this was what the new life might look like. Smaller scale, mission-driven, focused on impact rather than profit margins. The thought felt both diminishing and liberating. Marcus came home from Morrison Construction covered in sawdust, smelling like wood and honest work. He found Victoria in the kitchen attempting to make dinner. Spaghetti and meatballs following a recipe she'd found online. His voice held amusement. "You know we can just order pizza, right?" Victoria gestured at the chaotic counter. "I'm learning to cook. It's going terribly, but I'm learning." He moved to stand beside her, checking the pot of boiling water. "You forgot to salt the pasta water." They cooked together, Marcus gently correcting Victoria's mistakes, while she gradually figured out the rhythm of meal preparation. By the time Emily came home from Zoe's house, dinner was ready. Slightly overcooked pasta, serviceable meatballs, sauce from a jar that Victoria pretended she'd made from scratch until Emily called her bluff. This was the new normal they were building. Small moments of domestic cooperation, stumbling toward something that might eventually feel natural. That night, after Emily was asleep, Marcus and Victoria sat on the back porch drinking tea. The November air was cold enough to see their breath. Victoria broke the silence. "I had a job offer today. Non-profit development work. Much smaller scale than Pierce, but potentially more meaningful." Marcus's interest was genuine. "Are you going to take it?" She considered the question. "I'm going to explore it. See if it feels right. I need to do something, contribute somehow. I can't just exist in your space indefinitely." His response came firm. "This isn't just my space anymore. You live here. This is your home too." The declaration settled into Victoria like warmth spreading through cold limbs. Home. She'd owned a 3,000-square-foot penthouse in Manhattan, but it had never been home. This small house with its creaky third step and dripping kitchen faucet felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. She leaned against Marcus's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The next week brought new rhythms. Victoria met with Amanda Reeves and found herself genuinely excited about the affordable housing projects Boston CDA was developing. She attended a school assembly where Emily received an award for creative writing. She had dinner with Marcus's brother Jake and his partner Thomas, enduring good-natured teasing about her rapid transformation from corporate CEO to suburban domestic. Dylan called twice, once about the Montana investigation. once to say the board had formally approved the transition and he was officially CEO. His voice held exhaustion rather than triumph. Victoria offered congratulations and gentle encouragement, then returned to her new life without looking back. On Friday evening, Marcus suggested they talk to Emily together about what was happening between them. The conversation felt terrifying and necessary in equal measure. They found Emily in her room, arranging her new art supplies with careful precision. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed. "Can we talk to you about something important?" Emily's expression went serious. "Am I in trouble?" Victoria joined them, taking Emily's small hand. "No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. We just want to talk about our family." The child's eyes went wide with hope and fear. "Is Mom V leaving?" Marcus answered quickly. "No, she's staying. But we wanted to tell you that Mom V and we care about each other. In a more than friends way." Emily processed this with 7-year-old directness. "Like dating? Like boyfriend and girlfriend?" Victoria nodded. "Something like that. We wanted to make sure you were okay with it." Emily's response was immediate and certain. "Obviously, I'm okay with it. I've been waiting for you guys to figure it out forever." The adults exchanged surprised glances. Emily continued with the confidence of someone who'd clearly given this extensive thought. "You make Daddy smile more. And you're not sad all the time like when you first came here. And we're a family now, so you should definitely get married so it's official." Marcus gently corrected. "We're not talking about marriage yet, Em. Just dating, taking things slow." Emily's expression suggested she thought adults were unnecessarily complicated. "Whatever. As long as Mom V stays." After Emily returned to her art supplies, seemingly satisfied with this development, Victoria and Marcus retreated to the hallway. "Did our 7-year-old just give us her blessing while implying we're moving too slow?" Marcus's laugh was genuine. Apparently, children don't believe in extended courtship periods. They stood close together in the narrow hallway, the space charged with possibility. Marcus leaned down and kissed Victoria softly, and she felt the last of her resistance dissolve. Not the desperate grab for approval that had driven her for 27 years, but something quieter and more sustainable. Not proving her worth, just accepting it. When then pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm terrified this won't work, that I'll mess it up somehow." His arms tightened around her. "Then we'll mess it up together and figure out how to fix it. That's what families do." The words settled into Victoria like a promise. Family. Not the toxic, competitive version Harrison Pierce had modeled, not the corporate structure disguised as human connection, but real family, messy and imperfect and choosing each other daily. She'd spent 27 years trying to be enough for the wrong people. Now she was learning to be enough for herself. The butterfly garden kit sat waiting on Emily's dresser, ready for spring. Victoria thought about metamorphosis, about creatures that had to completely dissolve before rebuilding themselves into something new. She was in that dissolving phase now, the old Victoria gone, but the new one still forming. It was terrifying. It was necessary, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing it alone.